Firstly, we're going to add about 15 litres of filtered water into our hot liquor tank. This will give us a ratio of about 3 litres of water per kilogram of grain. Next, turn on the power for our elements because we're going to heat the water up. Today we're using 2 elements, so our brew day goes a bit faster. Write down everything that happens, your ingredients, all the process, because we want to make sure that we know exactly what happened if we want to rebrew again. While the water's heating up, be sure to monitor the temperature. For this brew we're aiming for 74 degrees Celsius. Using a kettle will help increase the temperature faster. Here we have our mash tun with our false bottom installed inside. Next we're going to preheat our mash tun with boiling water. Don't pour it down the sides or it will warp your container. Preheating our mash tun helps us achieve our ideal mash temperature. Here Greg's going to splash the hot water all over the mash tun to try and get it nice and warm, making sure he doesn't burn himself, and then he's going to discard the water. It looks as if our mash liquor is at 74 degrees Celsius. We're ready to start the mash. Attach some hose to the hot liquor tank and start draining the water into the mash tun. Once the water is above the level of the false bottom, we can start adding our grain, mixing thoroughly. We know from experience that the mash liquor will drop about 7 degrees once we add the grains. This means that from our starting temperature of 74 degrees, we're going to get a mash temperature of 67 degrees Celsius, which is where we want it to be. Mix very thoroughly. We don't want any dough balls. You might notice Greg's wearing a mask. If you have any allergy to dust or to grain, it's worthwhile investing in a mask. Of course, the main problem with the mask is you can't smell how great the mash smells. Check your mash temperature with a thermometer, ensuring that you dig deep to make sure you get as accurate a temperature as possible. The main reason we're aiming for 67 degrees Celsius is that we want our pale ale to be more dextrinous and have more body. If we wanted it to be more fermentable, we'd aim for maybe 63 degrees Celsius. If the mash is a bit too cold, we can always use our over-the-side element to heat the mash up slightly. Once we're happy with our mash temperature and we're confident that the mash is thoroughly mixed, we'll put on our lid and let alpha and beta amylase break down the starches into simple sugars. When we're not using our implements, let them sit in a bucket of water so they don't become sticky. Remember, write everything down. What time the mash starts, what the temperature was, everything. Once the mash is started, we're going to add about 20 litres of filtered water to our hot liquor tank for our sparge water. For this system, we're going to aim for about 80 degrees Celsius for our sparge water. Continue to write everything down, everything that happens, everything that you do. Partway during the mash, feel free to take the temperature to make sure the temperature hasn't dropped by too much. If it has, you may need to reheat the mash. You can also give the mash a gentle stir. We find this helps improve efficiencies. We recommend doing an iodine starch conversion test to see if the starch is converted into simple sugars. Take a small amount of grain and add a little bit of iodine. Mix the concoction and then look out for any colour change. Blue-black, faint red, mahogany, violetish reddish, that indicates there's still starch present. If it doesn't change colour, that suggests that your mash is complete. An optional step to take at the end of your mash is a mash out. That's where we heat our mash up to between 75 to 77 degrees Celsius. The mash out will stop any enzyme activity as well as thinning out the mash a bit, which will help us get better sugar extraction. Once you've hit 75 to 77 degrees Celsius, hold that temperature for 10 minutes. Check the temperature of your sparge water. We're aiming for 80 degrees Celsius. After our mash out, we're going to recirculate some of the sweet wort. This entails taking some of the sweet wort off and then adding it back on top of the mash. We do this until the liquid becomes clear. This clears out any grains, and it means we're adding clear wort into the kettle. It also helps set the grain bed, which enables it to filter better. Looks pretty clear now. And again. Next, run a bit of hose into the bottom of the kettle from the mash tun. We're going to add our flow restrictor on, which is some engine clamps. And we're going to start our sparge. The idea being that we'll be rinsing the grains and taking off the sweet wort from the bottom. Our false bottom will act as a false bottom, which means the grains can't get through. But we're taking nice, clear, sugary, sweet wort into our kettle. It's quite a slow process. We want to get as much of the sugars out of the grain as we can, hence why we have the flow restrictors to keep it nice and slow. This particular method of sparging is called continuous sparging or fly sparging, and it usually gives us the best yield. The way it works is we're slowly adding the sparge water as we drain the wort away. Here you can see the grain bed is showing, so we're going to increase the rate of our sparging. Back on track again, we're going to measure our temperature. Remember, we're aiming for about 75 to 77 degrees Celsius, which is why our sparge water is a little hotter than that. Once we've reclaimed enough wort to cover the element, we'll turn our element on to start heating up the wort, ready for the boil. Heating up the wort at this stage just shortens our brew day. It's now the end of sparge, so we're going to take a quick sample of our end of sparge to make sure our specific gravity is not below 1008. Below 1008 SG, we can get astringency in our beer. The spent grain you can make into biscuits, bread, give it to the chooks, or sprinkle it on your garden. The grain is no longer any use to us, so we're going to get rid of the grain in the mash tun and lift up our kettle and get ready for the boil. Here you can see the hot break starting to form. The boil will be coming along very soon. While we're waiting for the boil to start, we're going to start sanitation using iodophor, and yes, that is spelt incorrectly. Here you can see Greg pumping an iodophor solution into the hose of the kettle. This means that once we've chilled the wort down after the boil, it's going to go through a very clean tube into the fermenter. The boil is now started. Remember to have some cold water on hand in case the hot break foams over. Take a sample of your start of boil and write down all the pertinent information about the boil. Be sure to write down things like how many litres you've got, what time the boil started, and when you're going to add the hops. Be sure to clean up after yourself as you go. It saves time in the long run. Discard the grains, clean out your hot liquor tank and your mash tun. Add your hops as per the schedule in your recipe. Greg's adding his bittering hops here, and he's using a bag to help reduce the amount of trub at the end of the boil. Remember that the longer you boil for, the more bitterness is extracted from your hops. The boil has a heap of important jobs, including sterilising the wort, destroying any leftover mash enzymes, stabilising the salts and solutions, extracting hop resins, driving off volatiles like DMS, coagulating and precipitating unstable proteins, evaporating excess water, and lowering the pH ready for fermentation. Towards the end of the boil, we'll add some more hops. These hops are more so for flavour than for bitterness. In the final 20 minutes, we're going to add our immersion chiller. By adding it at this point, the boiling wort will sterilise our chiller. At this point, we'll also add our kettle findings to help coagulate some proteins. Here we're using some Irish moss, but we could also use some Wilflock tablets or some Brew Bright. This is our final hop addition right at the end of the boil. This is for aroma, and this time we're not going to worry about using a bag. At the end of the boil, we're going to turn off the power. At this point we could do a whirlpool, but we're just going to chill our wort down to pitching temperature. The way we're doing this is by running normal tap water through our immersion chiller, which is in turn chilling down the wort. After quite some time, our wort is now at the appropriate temperature. We've taken off our clamp, let the iodophor drain out, and we're just going to use some boiling water just to rinse things out nicely. Next, we'll put our sanitised fermenter in place, and then we're going to open up our clamp and allow our wort to start draining into our fermenter. Here you can see it start to fill up. Always make sure that your tap is tight and closed and that your wort is not going to drain all over the floor. Once you've drained the kettle off, leaving the tube behind, and you're at the desired pitching temperature, add your yeast. Here Greg's using a liquid yeast, which he cultured up just the other day. Give it a wipe, put on the lid, and that is how you do 3-vessel brewing.
Truly magnificent. Absolute pleasure to be here.